Marinieves Alba, and I'm a community school director for the Children's Aid Society in New York City. We now go by Children's Aid, we just had our name change, and I actually run the Mirabal Sisters Community School Campus, which is a 4-school co-location, so 4 public schools, what we call middle school, so between primary and secondary grades 6 through 8, co-located in one public school building. Between the 4 populations, we have just under 1,900 students, ages about 10 to 14, with the exception of a few over-age middle schoolers, right? And we are a full-service community school. So we were founded over 24 years ago as a project and partnership of the Children's Aid with the New York City Department of Education. At that time, the Department of Education was actually looking to build new schools in response to a large influx of immigrants from the Dominican Republic in the Caribbean. We didn't have sufficient seats in our local public schools to accommodate all of the incoming children and the families that were sort of beginning to settle in Upper Manhattan. So if you know anything about New York, Manhattan is sort of one of 5 boroughs. And we are in the northern part of Manhattan. So our student population today is, depending on the school, which of the 4 schools you're discussing, ranges anywhere from 92 to 96% poverty. So we use, similar to your SMDI index, we use sort of free lunch as the standard for determining, what the social conditions of our students are. And it ranges from about 92 to 96% on my campus. 40% of those students are English language learners, which means that English is not their first language. About 18% are special needs students, and 93% of this population is Latin American, Latino, Latinx, primarily from the Dominican Republic, but increasingly from Mexico and El Salvador in Central America. And we have the remaining 7% is Black American, so Black students that are descendants of Africans in the United States, but increasingly we have an influx of Africans from Francophone West Africa primarily, and also from Yemen. So we have new populations of Arabic speakers, as well as French and different ethnic languages from across West Africa. So this is obviously a population that we're now learning to accommodate. And I guess I'll begin there because part of what I want to share with you is that a lot of the work that we do, both as a community school in terms of addressing the needs of the whole child, but also in terms of family engagement, a lot of it is really about adaptability and flexibility and sort of being responsive to the ever-changing dynamics of our school community. In a case, traditionally our school has, as I said, been primarily Dominican, with a very specific set of needs attached to both the migration experience of Dominicans and English language learners that are Spanish dominant, and obviously, a particular type of poverty. One of the things I say, we often speak of poverty and people who live in poverty as this monolithic whole, but poverty looks different everywhere, and I imagine that across Scotland as well, poverty looks different depending on what community you are visiting, and the face of poverty is different. So I'll start there by saying that while, part of our work as both a place, a community school, and our work as a strategy to really remove barriers to learning for children and attainment for children is really rooted in this notion that there's a great diversity within the stereotypical monolith that people refer to as poverty, right? And so a lot of our work with parents and with students is really rooted in trying to do real-time needs assessment, right? To assess not only the academic needs of children, but also the social-emotional needs of children, and then the broad needs of their families. A lot of our family engagement is rooted in connecting families to resources that will build their capacity to be stronger families. And I think that that's a really critical element of our work. In terms of our sort of, role as a community school, we are, as I was explaining earlier, we are what's called a full-service community school. So we have the great privilege of having, over time, built up a significant amount of resources within the school building or the campus, where we have a full school-based health center, a mental health program, after-school programs or extended learning opportunities, summer camps in summer, holiday camps during holidays, family and community engagement programming, which includes both family learning, training in advocacy and leadership, And really just, I think the creation of a broad ethos which really promotes both parent volunteerism within the school, obviously engagement and advocacy on behalf of their children's academic needs, and then really sort of proactive responsiveness to whatever the broad needs of the child are. We really speak of children as, we speak of children in terms as the whole child, so really looking at their SEL, social emotional needs, their physical wellness and mental health wellness needs, their academic needs, and then sort of the broad range of factors that inform their identity both within and outside of the school. So that's very complex work. I'll start there, right? It's very complex work that requires an investment of both, clearly lots of financial resources, but also, resources in general. Whether it's information, building partnerships with other community organizations. We are a nonprofit or a third sector organization, but we also manage relationships, many relationships with local universities, other nonprofit organizations, cultural institutions, local businesses, public agencies, so the Department of Health, the Department of Youth and Community Development, a myriad of public agencies that help to resource our school community. So that when we become aware of a particular need for a child or for a family, it's not our job to sort of do all of the things that a family needs, but we do consider it our job to connect families to information and resources that can support their needs. So while we are very fortunate, as I said, in that we're full service and we have really a very concentrated sort of well of resources inside of our building, we also understand that we can't do it all. So in that regard, I'm sort of a conductor of an orchestra, conductor of resources, whether they're inside or outside of the building. And so, in terms of, I think, the broad philosophy around family, parent, and caregiver engagement, really the idea is that by building capacity in parents, caregivers, and families, you're really building capacity for children. And I think that's a really good place to begin. I think that instructional leaders, in your case, what you call head teachers, in our context, principals, instructional leaders and teachers, educators, have an extremely demanding job. You have a very difficult job. And of course, particularly when you're working in context, when we are working in context where need really is so intense and so grave, you sort of are contending with layers and layers and layers and layers of challenges before you can even get to the work of teaching, right? And put children in a position to get to the business of learning. I think that in my role as a community school director and just in terms of children's aid's broad philosophy on family engagement and how it supports learning, I think the idea is that we want to help, third sector organizations such as my own, or, I was talking to my colleague here and he was talking about the fact that Alloa now has a family worker, actually using humans, this very rich resource that we have of human beings, placing people in roles that will help to sort of unpeel some of those layers so that teachers can get to the business of teaching and instructional leaders can get to the business of leading their school communities, is really what we're about. It's what it's our work. It's really the heart of what we do. And I think also that, the other piece is in supporting the philosophical shift, if you will, or the values shift, embedding our values and our commitment to really supporting whole people, right, in their experience as students, these little people and these medium-sized people and these slightly bigger people, really supporting whole people to have the best conditions that they can possibly have for learning. And I think that often, again, particularly, at least in our context, with the pressures of standardized exams and scores and attainment and meeting all of the benchmarks that, your respective, in our case, Department of Education or your local authority may have for you, that we sometimes forget that the other part of our work is really in cultivating the humanity of our children, our families, and also our school community. So I think that, when you sort of commit to this process, whether it's, community school process or family engagement as sort of a pillar of your work, initially our reticence is sort of, well, who has time for that? That's like a whole other job. And it actually is a whole other job. And it's really critical, that we understand that it is actually a whole other body of work that needs to get done, but that it is a very critical and essential work that supports the work of teaching and learning.